what Shailaja asked me to do is to talk about theater in these troubled times, or let's say arts in these troubled times. I'm always reminded of that Brecht statement when the question is, in the dark times, will there also be singing? And the answer is, yes, there will also be singing about the dark times. So this is a very telling statement. We are living in dark times. These are the dark times. And yes, there has to be theater. There has to be singing. There has to be dancing in these dark times. And it has to address these times. That is the most crucial thing, that we cannot live in our own little worlds. We have all done different kinds of theater where, sort of we address very individual problems, very small issues. But today is the time when we have to look at what is happening around us. We have to talk about the daily struggles, about the oppression and the suppression that is happening, about frightening normalizing of lies. Today we do not blink an eyelid when somebody is telling a big lie. We just think that it's okay, people do that. And that is something which is very, very frightening about the kind of polarization, about daily brutalization, about freedom of expression, about destruction of diversity. And I can go on and I can take 30 minutes to talk about what are these troubled times about and what do we need to address. And there is a lot to address. So today, I don't think the artist has the liberty to not be political. I don't think the artist has the liberty to say that, oh, I don't want to get into politics. So, because I think that would be the most illiterate statement to make, in my view, because these are times which are very different from normal times. These are times which need to be addressed from all directions. There has to be kind of multifaceted action, different art forms, different structures, different methods from where we need to approach, where we approach different groups of people, we approach different areas, different regions, different problems, and find new innovative ways of doing that. Because when things are so bad, you cannot talk, sort of sing songs of nature. You have to sing song of the dark times, and that's very, very crucial. So, and also it is very crucial because today the politics is getting into our homes, into our lives. It's deciding what we eat. It's deciding what we wear. It's deciding who we love. And that is not acceptable. And theater is a very, very potent medium which is about society, which is about individual, which is about relationships, and which is about this power struggle that we have day to day in our everyday life. And therefore it is most equipped to handle these times. It is most equipped to raise questions which nobody else is doing, unfortunately. Something like the media, which was our watchdog, which needed to do this, has been bought over. And therefore, we have to guard ourselves against not only being bought over, but also against being silent when this is happening. We cannot afford to be silent. And this is something which, I know that it's easy to say that. It's very difficult to implement because there is a whole lot of questions that come up as to how we do it, where do we do it, what are the risks, and that is where people like Tista really are an inspiration, that in spite of the risks, in spite of all the powers against her and people like her, she goes ahead without cynicism, goes ahead without fear, and it is these efforts, individual, small efforts, that make a large reality. So I think that is what we need to do. And that is what we in theater and the arts also need to approach. But I also want to say that when I'm saying that we need to be political, that we need to take a stand, that we cannot be silent, I do not mean that we need to shout slogans. I do not mean that we need to preach. I do not mean that we need to judge. What I mean is that we need to create works of art which reach out to people in a human way, which reach out to people with a warmth, which are able to sensitize people, which are able to stimulate change, which are able to teach us and those who are our audience to empathize with the marginalized, those which are being oppressed. And I think that is the real challenge, that what are the forms, what are the methods, what are the kind of things that we'll do which will not become slogans, which will not become, sort of shouting, but will be, which will be aesthetic, which will be artistic, and which will be forceful, which will reach out. Because we all know that theater doesn't change society. Theater doesn't create a movement. But we know, and we know for a fact, that theater prepares for that change. Theater creates the ground for that change. And that is what we need to do, because some people have worked for about 100 years to create the ground for change that we see today. And now it is our turn to work silently at the grassroots and with larger and larger communities to create the ground for rational thinking, for progressive thinking, for humanizing, for, sort of creating a kind of equal society. And for that, we need to understand today's reality. It is very complex. We need to understand the various forces that are creating the reality today. We need to understand how what is the mechanics by which this is happening, what is the kind of social structure in which it is happening, and therefore understand, sort of what is the kind of work we can do. Because as the reality changes, the modes of representation also need to change. We cannot continue with the kind of work that we were doing. We cannot have the same structures. We cannot have the same forms. And what one can say is that theater is lucky that it is a very powerful medium. It has at its disposal a combination of what all the art forms have. So it has words, it has ideas, it has the body which works in a space, it has the sound and the music, it has the visual and the image, and it just needs mastering these tools with your imagination, creating something exciting, challenging, full of warmth, and full of understanding. You see, we can never match the pace of politicians the way they throw a new brutal reality at us every day. We need time to think, we need time to reflect, we need time to understand before we create a work of art and then reach out to people. So I think that reflection is a very important part of this whole process. The assessment of what is happening in our society is very important. The understanding of why people are going along with a certain ideology is very important. We cannot just brush people aside, that, oh, they are like that, and, sort of judgment is not going to help. There are forces at work which we need to grasp and then create the work that we have to create. And when I say that, you know, sort of it will need different modes of representation, I would just like to remind you that way back in 1943, when we were fighting fascism, and we were also in the midst of the independence struggle, an organization, a national organization like IPTA came up, the Indian People's Theatre Association. And they had a countrywide reach. They had an understanding of how they can reach out, so they would reach the nook and corners of the country through the traditional artist, gave just ideas, and the traditional artist wrote plays, wrote narratives, wrote kathas, and reached out with all his artistry at his command and the kind of power to connect with people. IPTA also created new modes of representation. I mean, when I hear from my parents who were part of IPTA, that how when they sang on stage, there was an audience of 10,000 people or 15,000 people just coming to listen to those songs. Now that's a very powerful tool. We have all our traditional forms which have the potential of being so popular. And if only we could put our faith in those artists, they could reach out with modern content, reach out with contemporary content. IPTA did that. IPTA also kind of initiated the street theatre movement, the street, going to mohallas, working with them. They created the new dance, drama kind of medium, which Shanti Bardhan and others did. And what was crucial in all this, not only were they innovating, but they were very, very particular about the quality, about the aesthetics. Because when we talk, we are not just any activists. We are artistic activists, we are cultural activists. So our art has to be in the forefront. We have to take pride in what we are doing, not just in what we are saying. Because we're not just saying, we are performing, we are expressing through our art. And that, I think, is extremely crucial. Another person and that is why I quoted Brecht, comes to mind is the kind of writing that Brecht did. He responded to his times, and, he therefore had to tweak the forms that were happening before him, which were very powerful, which were very popular, but he felt that it needed a different kind of theatre to make people aware, to make people question, and to make a kind of critical audience. And therefore, that was his response to his times. I am reminded of a very interesting conversation I had with one of our visiting directors from Poland in National School of Drama. I had been noticing for several years that whenever anybody from East Europe, any director, came, whether it was East Germany or Poland, or even USSR, they would work very closely with a lot of on subtext. I hope you all understand what is subtext, that what the word is saying, there is a lot else that is being meant through, and which is expressed through the body, through the sound, through the space, through the compositions, through the properties. Now, so I asked him that, how come, most of you work so much on subtext? And he says the reason is very simple. We have all had very dictatorial regimes which sort of asked for strong censorship. Now, in a world of censorship, how do we say what we want to say? So we say it through the subtext. And that subtext is what the audience comes to see. They have all seen that play several times. But they want to see how we are saying that, what we are saying through that word, or in that moment, or in that situation. And I thought that was a very, very interesting statement and a kind of an answer to what we can do in this, sort of in these times when all words are being stifled, all modes of expressions are being stifled, all speech is being stifled. We have to find modes where we will be able to communicate through some kind of subtext. And therefore, I feel that it is a great responsibility for us to create these new methods or new modes or new structures of what we express and how we express them. But while we are doing this, we have to also be very cautious that we don't fall into traps. One of the very possible traps, and an easy trap, is to fall into the trap of revivalism. You know, when we approach tradition, when we approach the traditional, we can start glorifying it like it is being glorified without a critical thought. But that is not what is going to change. That is not what is going to bring in progressive ideas. Progressive ideas can only come if we question all existing structures, and particularly the structures that are being touted by the establishment today. That is very crucial, that those structures are particularly questioned. And so these are a lot of challenges which I feel that we as creative people face. I just feel that, you know, I feel guilty when I'm saying all this, because it's all so much of you should do that, and you should do that, while I don't have really very concrete answers. But one of the things which I feel very passionately about is the fact that we have to look 30 years, 50 years ahead of what will happen. Because for me, you know, we have been brought up in a very liberal times. We have been brought up to dream of liberal times. We have been brought to believe that this is a society which is gradually progressing and will gradually become more and more equitable, more and more just, more and more inclusive. But what we are seeing is something different, and the children who are growing up today are seeing only this, are learning only this, are exposed to only this. And what is even more frightening is that there is no exposure to the alternative. There is no other that is being seen by them. And that is very frightening. And therefore, I feel that what we need to pay attention to is at the level of education, at the level of school education, where I think once again the arts and particularly theatre can play an extremely major role. I have been very actively engaged in theatre in education and drama in education, where we know that those modes of, you know, classroom teaching or pedagogy create a very different kind of child, because it is participative, because it tries to give ownership of that subject, of that expertise to the child, because it believes in trusting the child, because it gets the child to, you know, articulate, gives the freedom or the space to the child to not just listen, but to contribute. That it gives not only the child confidence, but it gives the child the habit to listen 20 others in his own class, each one coming out with a different point of view. And it makes him sympathetic, or at least gives him an understanding that there can be 10 different points of view. That it is all right to have 10 different points of view. That we can live together with all these different points of view. And that, to me, is very, very crucial in this whole process of theatre in education and drama in education. We make the child think, you know, the task of the teacher or the facilitator is not to tell the child what is right, what is wrong, what are the answers. The task of the facilitator is to put them in situations where they find the answers. And once they find the answers, they feel empowered. And once they're pushed into finding the answers, they have to make choices. They have to think. They have to confront 20 others in their own class. They have to answer what the others are asking. And that, I feel, is the key to preparing a thinking citizen, which is what we find lacking today. Which is fine. We suddenly find what's happened to the people. Why are they thinking like that? How can they not see the reality? How can they not understand what is so obvious? But it is because our systems, our education systems down the ages have only created children who are meant to listen, not to think, not to participate, not to contribute, not to question. And I feel that one of our major contributions, one of the answers that I can give, I don't have answers to many questions, but one of the answers I can give is that as many of us as can get involved at the school level, then and engage with children, not preaching them that this is right and this is wrong, but for them to find out for themselves what is right, what is wrong, for them to make sense of the world around them, for them to make sense of the society, of them questioning their own people, their own parents, for instance. And I think that is very crucial. That is where there can be hope. I don't think in the immediate future we have ready structures which can challenge what is happening. But at least we can try to safeguard what can happen or what should happen in the future. So I think that to me is one of the answers to what is happening today. Let us all join hands to reach out to the young, to give them alternatives, to make them aware of what the alternatives are, can be, and to look for more alternatives, to question everything that they do, to make a critical choice. And that would be preparing for a better society. And with that, let me close with another Brecht quote. Bank robbery is an initiative of amateurs. True professionals establish a bank. So let them go, let them go on robbing, let them go into destroying. But our task is to build a more positive future. Thank you.